There is some major movement happening in Ukraine. Ukrainian troops liberating strategic towns in the eastern Donetsk region. Soldiers raising the Ukrainian flag over the city of Liman just hours after Russia illegally claimed they were annexed. Russia is also acknowledging these advances, which is in and of itself surprising. But there are also reports of Russians going door to door in occupied areas of Ukraine, looking now for young men to enlist in their fight. Today, Russia's legislature is beginning the process of approving President Putin's plans to annex these 4 key parts of Ukraine. Joining me now on the very latest here is CNN military analyst, retired General Wesley Clark. He's a former NATO Supreme Allied Commander, and CNN national security analyst Steve Hall. He's the CIA's former chief of Russia operations. It's good to see you both. General Clark, what do you make of the gains that President Zelensky is now claiming, that Ukrainian troops are regaining ground, we should say, in the very same places that Putin's claiming now as part of Russia?
I think it's very heartening to see the gains the Ukrainians have made. The concern is don't go too fast. Don't outrun your supplies. Don't outrun your reinforcements. Keep steady pressure on. Steady wins this race.
Steve, Putin is trying to claim now that an attack in these areas is essentially and directly an attack on Russia, is what Putin is trying to say. I want to play for you how White House spokesman John Kirby responded to this today.
It's not an attack on Russia. It is Ukrainian soil. It was Ukrainian soil. It is today, and it will be tomorrow. And we're not in the business of telling President Zelensky how he goes about conducting military operations. What we are doing is making sure he has the capabilities and the systems that he needs to do that effectively, and he is.
But does this change anything about how Russia will respond when Ukrainians do attack?
You know, I'm not sure, Kate, that it really will. I think what's happened is that, Putin has tried to do this bait and switch operation where he simply says, okay, now this is all mine. Of course, he doesn't control that territory fully. So it's difficult to understand, what reasonable person would think that he actually, can annex something that he doesn't control. But no, I'm not sure that it'll change things. I mean, the most effective thing that Putin has done so far is nuclear saber rattling. He can't use those weapons, he knows, without paying an extremely high price. So he's doing the next best thing. He's making us worried about it and asking ourselves that question. If we move into those areas which they have now annexed, would he consider something like that? That's really his strongest option right now, Kate.
I do want to ask you more about that in just a second. But first, General, we do know that one consideration of the Biden administration around supplying weapons to Ukraine all along is not wanting to be seen as a direct party to the conflict, in direct conflict with Russia, if you will. Alex Marquardt, my colleague, is reporting as a way to overcome U.S. resistance to supplying a certain longer-range rocket system, Ukraine is offering the U.S. full visibility into their list of Russian targets, essentially giving the U.S. veto power. What do you think of that, and what do we need to know then about this missile system, the Army tactical missile systems that Ukraine's asking for?
Well, first of all, as far as Putin's concerned, we are directly involved. So we're playing a game with our own population here. But the Russians say it's World War III against us and against NATO. So we're only fooling ourselves. Now, I think it's a wonderful thing that the Ukrainians are going to expose their target list to us and give us a veto power on these things. They know more than we do, though, and we've got to be careful about this because they are the ones, it's their territory, it's their lives that are being spent. And so got to respect what they're doing. I'm going to tell you, we need those ATACMS in there. The president so far has said no, but we need the Switchblade 600s, and they're being held up and have been held up for 6 months in various bureaucratic snafus inside the administration. And those drones, those killer drones that we're going to put in there are critical. They can do some of the same things that the ATACMS can do. Not as far, but they're very effective going across the lines, and they need these weapons in Ukraine. So I hope we're going to accelerate and expedite what we're providing to the Ukrainians. They've got momentum. This is the time to do it.
That's interesting. Steve, you talked about nuclear saber rattling, and I wanted to ask you more about that, because with concerns now growing that Putin will escalate further to even using nuclear weapons, the White House is warning and generally saying over and over again, consequences will follow. Be sure of that. I want to play for you what General David Petraeus actually says those consequences could be.
Just to give you a hypothetical, We would respond by leading a NATO, a collective effort that would take out every Russian conventional force that we can see and identify on the battlefield in Ukraine and also in Crimea and every ship in the Black Sea Fleet.
If that is what is being considered in response, Steve, how does Vladimir Putin receive that?
You know, Vladimir Putin is in a really difficult position with his nuclear weapons, as I indicated earlier. I mean, these are sort of the weapons that he dare not use unless he is willing to fully deal with the consequences, which, of course, could result in anything from a significant non-nuclear response from the West, potentially a nuclear response from the West. But the thing that he also has to consider is the price that he would pay both internally and internationally for use of any nuclear weapon, whether it was low yield or whether it was strategic. I mean, China and India have already both expressed grave concerns about that. And I can only imagine that there are folks inside leadership circles in the Kremlin who are saying, look, we have to be extremely careful with this. So it must be incredibly frustrating for Vladimir Putin to have these really strong weapons that he knows he can't use unless he's willing to fully face the music if he decides to use them, Kate.
Yeah, it's good to see you, Steve. General, always great to have you. Thank you so much.